Hello, everyone, and welcome into a special edition of Content Coverage. We're doing this about an hour and a half early, but we got some big news on a Sunday afternoon, so figure why not strike while the iron is hot here. Georgia goes into Virginia and lands a very talented linebacker prospect, Chris Cole, the number 56 overall player in the 2024 recruiting class. He adds to Georgia's 2024 recruiting haul, the number 56 overall player in the class. Cole commits to Georgia on Sunday afternoon. Georgia holds off a late push from USC. They hold off a push from Tennessee. We'll have Jeff Sentell here shortly. In fact, I think we have him on right now, potentially. This is another big recruiting win for the Georgia Bulldogs, specifically for linebacker coach Glenn Schumann. Sort of completes the class there with what Georgia has. You have five-star prospect Justin Williams. You have four-star prospect Chris Jones there as well. And Glenn Schumann continues to bring in elite linebacker talent year after year. A year after signing C.J. Allen, who played the most snaps out of any linebacker yesterday for Georgia. Raylan Wilson, who made his debut yesterday and showed some promising flashes, and Troy Bowles, who were all top 100 prospects in the 2023 recruiting cycle. You add to that once again, this time landing CJ Cole out of Virginia. Let's see if we can maybe bring Jeff on here. Not quite yet, but and landing Chris Cole, this is another big win for Glenn Schumann. He is, in my opinion, the best defensive coordinator in the country right now. Georgia has allowed 10 points through their first two games of the season here. And really, but all 10 of those points came in the fourth quarter when those games were blowouts. I think with Schumann and what you see here with the wonderful commitment edit done by Casey Dunn, our social media person here for DawgNation, Chris Cole, freaky linebacker talent at 6'3", and maybe even closer to 6'4", 220 pounds. Almost kind of like a safety playing linebacker. And what I'll continue to say about Chris Cole and what Georgia has and what Georgia is getting in him. This is a guy who you look at some of the best linebackers to come from Georgia of late. Shmuel Munden is sort of fits in that freak mold of a guy who is just an incredible athlete, a guy that can probably play if needed. Some safety is certainly going to be your dime backer as he continues to get healthy. He started yesterday for the first time and really had a positive impact. Now, technical issues resolved. We have Jeff Sentell here. Jeff, talk to the people about Chris Cole. What are they getting? Why was Georgia able to win out? Especially when, Shmuel Munden's probably headed to the NFL after this year. Jamon Dumas-Johnson potentially headed with him as well. But this is a loaded Georgia linebacker room, already a loaded Georgia class. How was Georgia able to land Chris Cole in this 2024 recruiting cycle?
Yeah, hey guys, welcome in. I think, folks, you need to celebrate this one. First of all, these commitments, they're going to be few and far between for the next 3 or 4 months. They get a tremendous player in Chris Cole. He becomes the number 7 highest rated prospect in the nation's number 1 class. Guys, I got Nakobe Dean vibes every time I talk to him. This young man has only made 1 B on his high school transcript. That was in Spanish. He wants to go into sports medicine. He wants to be a doctor. I'm going to give you guys 2 things that's not even on the DawgNation story on the webpage. Just kind of a little nugget here that makes you know, like, this kid really is genuine. When I was talking to him, sometimes the words are printed on the paper and they don't really come across with the emphasis. Like, sometimes I wish I could put soundtracks or interview soundtracks into a lot of these discussions. And I was talking to Chris, and I was like, Chris, he talked to me about development, academics, where he feels like he's a fit. And he wants to be around great people. That was his criteria for forever. He basically knew Georgia checked all those boxes with a 40-foot tall checkbox emoji on every one of those. And I said, well, how do you think Georgia rates in the development? Well, I said, which school would develop you the most? And he said, man, that's Georgia. Then I said, well, anybody else? And there was those dramatic pauses, and he finally named a couple of schools. But to me, it was clear from the jump when I was talking to him. One other cool story, and I kind of knew this was back in June that Chris Cole would be tailor-made for this class, is Chris Cole was at the Elite 11. It was like the All-22 Elite 11 competition that's held every year. This year it was in California, Redondo Beach, California. But he's working out and he's wearing a Georgia shirt. And this is like days before his official visit. And Dylan Raiola walks by and he goes, "Hey, man, cool Georgia shirt." And he's like, "Thanks, man." And I guess just the look that was exchanged from both of those, I kind of got the vibes that Cole knew that he was going to visit Georgia. He knew that Glenn Schumann had prioritized him and told him, what was going to happen with DeMarcus Riddick, what was going to happen with Christopher Jones, what was going to happen with Justin Williams. So he felt like he was really plugged in the whole time. Georgia now has 6 top 10 linebackers in the last 2 cycles. That's unheard of, my friend Connor. But to me, Chris was like, I get to play with that guy. The same school that has him wants me. I think that was impressionable. Later on that night, I'd missed him because I had to catch Ryan Puglisi. I had to catch a couple of camp counselors. I had to catch Dylan Raiola. That was my bad. And I said, "Hey, Chris, I'm sorry I missed you. Is there any way we can chat later?" And him and his family members basically turned around the car. And Connor, this never happens. They turned around the car after they left an event, came back, had a great perfunctory interview. I think that clip you're showing right there is the one actually of Chris Cole wearing that Georgia shirt right there. This guy has incredible athleticism. He's a guy that can develop a little bit. He doesn't mind sitting as long as he's being developed. Maybe the most fascinating things, and I got 2 good ones, Connor. One, he finished number 4 at the Nike Nationals indoor this year in the hurdles, 60-meter hurdles. That's a guy that's going to go be a linebacker for Georgia. And then also probably the coolest part of this story, I've never seen anything quite like this before. He had offers from almost everywhere in the country as a safety last fall as a junior, 6'3", 185 pounds. Connor, he totally changed his body to become a Georgia linebacker, a Schumann backer, so to speak. 6'4", about 220 now as a Sam linebacker for his high school. Connor, we don't see that ever where a guy changes his body like that and then picks up the Georgia offer and is just as fast, just as explosive as he was when he was playing in the secondary.
And I'll say this, yes, he's coming into a talented linebacker room along with another talented linebacker class. But you look at the ways that this Georgia defense is changing, and I think it helps to have sort of a specialized skill set or do things that make you unique and stand out. Like Jalen Walker, probably through the first couple games right now, it's not looking like he's going to be an every down player at that inside linebacker position from Georgia. He's going to play a huge part of this defense because of what he's able to do as a pass rusher and specialize in that area. Similarly, Shmuel Munden, the athleticism that he brings that allows him to be a third down, sort of middle of the field linebacker, sort of like a safety in the middle of that defense, an additional defensive back out there allows him to get on the field. I know it's a talented class. I know, well, yes, Cole is one of the top linebacker prospects in the country. Justin Williams is ranked ahead of him. Chris Jones is certainly a capable player. And these rankings are not everything. CJ Allen was, I believe, top 70 player, and Kirby Smart has been more effusive in praise of him than almost any other freshman that I can remember in my time covering this Georgia program under Kirby Smart. With what Chris Cole brings from an athletic standpoint, yeah, he's going to probably take some time to get used to the size and speed that he's going to need to play at Georgia. But with Shmuel Munden moving on to the NFL, most likely next year as a first-round pick, I think if he's able to stay healthy throughout this entire season, with what Cole is able to do athletically, you do sort of see him potentially fitting into that mold as that dime linebacker, as that guy that can drop in coverage, but is also effective in the run game and will have the weight necessary to play and hang in the box when called upon in that manner. And so, look, Tennessee needs guys like Chris Cole if they're going to make that jump to go to the next level. USC needs defensive players, period. The fact that Georgia was able to hang on and beat out both those programs, with Cole visiting both of those programs in back-to-back weeks to sort of start the season before he made his final decision here, I think it just speaks to what Georgia has in Glenn Schumann and its defensive coordinator, inside linebackers coach. I know Brian Hartline recruits wide receivers incredibly well. With the way that Georgia has developed inside linebackers, Roquan Smith had a monster game today. Quay Walker is dominating for the Green Bay Packers. With what Georgia continues to do at that inside linebacker position, Glenn Schumann does not necessarily get enough credit, certainly from a national perspective in terms of what he's doing with inside linebackers. And Chris Cole is just the latest example of that, in my opinion.
Connor, I think it's a template here. How Quay Walker did a certain thing for the Dogs, how Nakobe did a certain thing for the Dogs, how Channing Tindall did a certain things for the Dogs. First of all, I think Justin Williams can do all those things. Maybe not the Quay Walker stuff, but yeah. I think Chris Cole can do all that Quay Walker stuff, and I think the traditional kind of run fitter, Christopher Jones is that guy, but he has a lot of boundaries as well too. He kind of extends the box He can cut. Both of these guys, Chris Cole and Christopher Jones, are going to be able to come off the edge. Maybe do some of that Jalen Walker stuff you're seeing right now. The big things we try to make sure every one of these young men have a unique story, a unique recruiting story. But the big picture here, Connor, is I think this is a triumphant win for the Georgia brand, because let's not kid ourselves. The USC offer, the USC ability to play there had a significant financial NIL component to it. That's what I believe. The same thing goes for Tennessee. And what Chris Cole did today by choosing Georgia was choosing Schumann, choosing Georgia's brand, choosing Georgia's academics to make this stuff sound even better. Chris Cole has family members about 30 minutes outside of Athens, an uncle who would probably bark as loud as anybody on this that's watching on this feed if somebody asked him to. Great human being, great person. I hope that story about him turning around and come to meet a reporter face to face for the first time that he'd never seen face to face for the first time. I think you touched on something earlier. All these guys Georgia gets are going to be superior athletes. Now, I don't know how many 8.44 60-meter hurdle guys that run 6'4" and 220 that even Schumann has collected so far for his linebacker room. But they got to be smart. And Chris Cole is definitely that. He felt needed. He felt wanted. He felt like when you look around the room, I totally believe, Connor, that C.J. Allen is going to attract other guys like him. Christopher Jones, other guys like him. So somehow, not only rebuilding the room with superior athletes, you're getting these kind of coaches type mindsets where they're going to do what they're told to do. No, it may not be executed perfectly, but that's what they're going to do. And that's the type of things when you're a freshman, Kirby Smart saying, he says so much to me when he talks about C.J. Allen. He's a good player. Got a pretty good chance to be a good player. 1 or 2 years from now, Kirby changes that tone to the type of things he says about Brock Bowers. I've noticed that over the years. And I think Chris Cole is going to be one of those guys. Is he going to play ahead of Justin Williams? Is he going to play ahead of Christopher Jones? No one knows that. The practice field knows that. But when he does get in there and he deserves the right to play, goodness.
And sort of wrapping up, and we'll let you go shortly after this, Georgia wants a specific type of player. And look, it's clear that with the way that they recruit at such a high level, you're going to have to want competition and want to not just go beat out the best, but also play with guys around you that make you better. I think that's the thing that impresses me right now with Chris Cole making this decision, knowing that, yeah, Justin Williams is going to be there. Yeah, you've got 3 studs ahead of you. And with the way Georgia recruits, you're probably going to have a few more studs behind you with what Georgia's going to bring in the 2025 recruiting class, already a commitment from Jaden Perlotti out of Buford. And despite all that, despite the position for, in my opinion, that has been the defining position for Georgia under Kirby Smart, that inside linebacker position, he still wants to come here. And the fact that he's choosing to do that, the fact that he's turning down significant money from USC, from Tennessee, places where not only is the financial offer attractive, the chance to play is just of attractive right there. And he's going to have a chance to get on the field early if he were going to those places. The fact that he elects to go to Georgia right now, I think speaks volumes about the sort of mental character, mental toughness that he has. And that's the kind of thing that, quite frankly, you just need to make it at UGA. It's not saying that other guys don't transfer and be successful elsewhere, or can't go be successful elsewhere. But with what Georgia really values in recruits right now, beyond the obvious athletic traits, is, I think, that culture side fit. And Cole, to me, fits that to a T.
Cole's got a lot. And I think the thing that really, we've covered a lot. We've tried to cover a lot. But, you look at Cole and what he does. The Georgia brand meant something to him. But he watched them practice, Connor. And when I hear recruits say, dude, I've seen so-and-so school practice. Let's not say the names. I've seen so-and-so school practice. And then I go see Georgia practice. And the secret sauce becomes not so secret anymore. They're like, that's why they do it. He's told me before, Georgia is for hard dudes that live and breathe football and are all about the business. And the best thing is they're not scared of competition. They're guys that are like, you know what? I'm going to find out how good I am. I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to do what I'm coached to do. I'm going to do it with extreme effort. And then I'm going to watch guys that waited a little bit. Quay Walker waited a little bit. Xavier Sorey. Connor, I see him sometimes, and he might be the fleetest of foot linebacker Georgia's ever had. Now, for them to get him in the right page and going the right way and making the right reads all the time, yeah. But when that light's on for Xavier Sorey, tremendous. He's another guy that I think might only have 1 or 2 more years left at Georgia. And then when he gets it all figured out, that's another NFL draft pick. Same thing with Pop. Same thing with Mondon. And you just see the continual reload. But it's also, I got to stress this, it's a reload of the mental component as well. And Folks, I know it's a Sunday. I know maybe some of you guys are watching your favorite NFC East team. Maybe you're watching some NFL football right now. This is one to go tell your wife, go tell your son, go tell your neighbor, hey, man, the Dogs got a really another good one today. And maybe not a lot of people noticed it, but Connor and Jeff on DawgNation sure did.
Yeah, Jeff, thanks so much for popping on with us, setting things up once again. Chris Cole commits to Georgia, another really talented player, number one player in the state of Virginia, number one recruiting class for Georgia. They continue to keep things rolling there. And with that, sort of touching on the big news of the night, Georgia adds another four-star linebacker, another really talented player. We're going to transition a little bit to our Sunday usual content. Now, we're going to speed through this because I obviously want to get to your guys' questions, what you guys have to say about Georgia following its win over Ball State. Bulldogs beat Ball State 45-3 yesterday. Wasn't a perfect game, but Kirby Smart will take a 6-touchdown win. And our first winner, it's Malachi Starks for me. This guy has been the best player on Georgia's defense to start the season. He had an interception yesterday. You heard Kirby Smart in the post-game press conference talk about how impressed he was with the play that he went out there and made in terms of coming down with that interception. I mean, it's watching him play the secondary right now. To me, what comes to mind is like watching Vince Carter in his prime dunk. I mean, just the way that he moves around the field is different, and it is a real joy to watch. Georgia loses Javon Bullard yesterday to an ankle injury. We'll see how long he is out for. Sprained ankle there for Bullard. And Georgia really doesn't miss a beat in the second half. Obviously, they're going to play better passing attacks starting this week with South Carolina. I thought Spencer Rattler, yes, that North Carolina game was a tough loss for them, but I thought Spencer Rattler hung on in there and made some nice plays. This is the first time I think the secondary has a chance to really get tested. But the two best players, in my opinion, for Georgia's defense so far, Malachi Starks and Tyke Smith, two guys in the safety and star position who, not just with what they bring from a pass coverage standpoint, but their ability to come up and hit you in the run has been really impressive to me so far. And so for Georgia to get that kind of play continuously out of Starks, who fully looks like he is a guy that is making the leap from a guy that started 14 games as a freshman All-American, had some real promising moments, struggled a little bit at the end of the year, probably hit that so-called freshman wall, but as a sophomore looks like a completely different player and looks like the best player on Georgia's defense right now. Loser here, slow starts. I know Kirby brought up the fact yesterday that, Ball State did a good job controlling the clock and limiting Georgia only 2 possessions in the first quarter, and then really took until the second quarter to get things rolling. But this offense has not yet come out firing in the way I think people want to see. And, you can even go look at the second half when they got the ball to start there. They threw an interception on the first drive. And so, part of this is I think the run game hasn't just clicked yet. Running back talent is not necessarily the greatest in the world right now. I thought Dylan Bell added some nice things there on Saturday for Georgia. The offensive line, I would say, has not played up to its potential so far. And so, Georgia's figuring things out. I would agree with Kirby Smart's assessment when it comes to Carson Beck. I thought we saw him make positive steps in his growth and what he's been able to do and how he's been able to play. There weren't some of those miscommunication errors that you saw in week 1. In week 2, I think they did a good job getting that cleaned up. I think as they play better competition and get deeper into the season, you're going to see them open this offense up a little bit more. A year ago, Todd Monken and this offense were a little reliant on screens and getting the ball out quickly and then having those guys turn those into 10, 15-yard games. And as Kirby points out, that's an extension of the run game. Georgia's perimeter blocking was just not good enough yesterday to turn those plays into, turn a 3-4 yard play into a 10, 11 yard play. And they've got to get that cleaned up. Arian Smith had a missed block. Oscar Delp had a missed block out on the perimeter. That's one area they have to get better at there. And I think if you do that, you allow those slow starts to sort of go away. Again, Georgia scored 31 points in the second quarter. Now, yes, they did force 3 turnovers in there, punt return for a touchdown. I get all that. I think, rightfully so, you still want to see this offense come out clicking and firing like it did at certain times last season. So with that in mind, we're going to transition. I know I touched on blocking at the wide receiver skill player position a second ago. The guy that does that better than anyone on the team other than Brock Bowers is Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint. Georgia got him back on Saturday. Caught a touchdown pass in the win. You've heard Carson Beck. You've heard Kirby Smart talk really in high praise of Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint. And so I think for Georgia to get him back, Carson said after the game, he's a real safety net for him. You see that on the touchdown catch. Carson makes a good tweak at the line of scrimmage. has Rosemy-Jacksaint as a safety valve. He scores a touchdown there. And so I think having a guy like Rosemy-Jacksaint, a veteran, a guy that came in with Carson, there's real chemistry there to go along with a Brock Bowers. Dominic Lovett, I think, had a nice step forward, and you saw him and Carson get on the same page this time around. Arian Smith, especially as a guy who, you see the big catch he had yesterday. I think that's how Georgia envisions using him on a week-to-week basis. Hopefully they're going to get Ladd McConkey back at some point. He just continues to battle a back injury. And let's also be fair here. Georgia doesn't need Ladd McConkey to beat UT Martin and Ball State. They're going to need him come the end of the season when they start playing some of these better teams. But for right now, I think they're right in being cautious with Ladd McConkey. And as anyone who's ever had a back injury, you don't have to be an athlete to know how tricky those can be and how frustrating it can be coming back from that. But getting Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint back, I think, is a big boost to this offense and what he's ultimately going to bring. He's a sure-handed guy. He's a guy that knows the system, knows the route tree, and is going to be able to make a positive impact for Georgia, even if he doesn't have the football in his hands there. Our next loser, and again, when we do this, we try to go, for the second one outside the purview of Georgia football. It's the SEC. This league, at least based on what we have seen so far this year, in my opinion, is down. It is not up to the standard of what it used to be or where it has been in recent years. I do not think this is a league that is going to get two teams in the college football playoff this year. You can look at Texas A&M giving up 48 points to Miami yesterday, getting flatly embarrassed down there as a favorite. Alabama, I think, really getting pushed around in a way that it hasn't against Texas and that loss there. Both those teams could win the SEC, get into the college football playoff. You could certainly see that. But those two teams right there have very obvious flaws. Florida's loss to Utah comes to mind. LSU losing to Florida State in week one. Not to mention South Carolina losing to North Carolina. What all those games have in common, those are all double-digit losses. And now, yes, not all of them were played at home. I believe off the top of my head, only the Alabama one was. But when you're losing like that in key non-conference games, it really sets a bad precedent for what your league is going to be this season. And I'll even include this here. I know Auburn won last night on the road at Cal. It was a gritty win for them. You're going to hear a lot of people say, that Auburn game on September 30th, it's going to be tricky. Going into Jordan Hare is a tough place to play. Hugh Freeze has had a lot of success in the past against Kirby Smart. I watched almost every play of that Auburn-Cal game last night. I'll tell you right now, unless the injury situation changes drastically, Auburn will score 0 points on Georgia when they play later in the month of September with what I saw from that offense last night. It was not it was a win, and you should be happy and thrilled with that if you're an Auburn fan. But that was not a good performance. Cal should have won that game. 3 missed field goals, an officiating error that took points off the board for them there. That is an Auburn team, and I know the pessimistic Georgia fan out there will want to slow your horses. I think Georgia's going to make a statement when they play Auburn based on what I saw last night against Cal, and that just again speaks to the rest of the league. I'm sure we'll get questions about Alabama and what things mean for them going forward, but based on the first 2 weeks of the season, based on non-conference play, the SEC as a whole is just down this year. Alabama's taking a step back. Texas A&M still in a little bit of a funk there. LSU not as quite good as we thought they would be. Even Mississippi State going overtime against Arizona as a 9-point home favorite. Just a real slog for some of the teams there. Obviously, Florida losing to Utah in the manner in which they did. So I think the SEC, it's just down this year. And that means Georgia's going to have to continue to roll. Even, Tennessee yesterday struggling against Austin Peay. Ole Miss, yes, that final score is 37-20. That was a game that they needed a late touchdown with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter to really take control there. And then things sort of spiraled out of the way for Tulane, who was playing a backup quarterback there. So if you're a Georgia fan who was sort of counting on the strength of the SEC to get Georgia in a year in way that has always been the case, I don't think you can count on it this year. I think Georgia's going to have to go out there and set and play to its own standard each and every week. I'm not saying that they necessarily have to go 13-0. I do believe that a one-loss SEC champion is always going to get in the college football playoff. But the idea that two teams from this league are getting into the college football playoff, from what I've seen right now, I find that very, very difficult to believe. And our last little winner here, we'll do this quick before getting to your guys' questions. Gabe Harris. This is a guy 2 weeks in a row that has really impressed me when he's popped on the field as a defensive lineman. Got to move from that outside linebacker position in part because of the depth on the Georgia defensive line. We'll see what his role becomes as the season progresses. They do lose Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins for a considerable chunk due to a foot injury that he suffered. Christian Miller left yesterday's game. Harris probably plays a position that's pretty similar to Michael Williams, who's the best player on Georgia's defensive line. And having said all that, this is a guy in Harris that has impressed me so far. And the three defensive linemen that played the most snaps for Georgia yesterday were all freshmen. That is not an accident, in my opinion, and that is Georgia very clearly trying to get some of their freshman defenders out there, get them experience while they can before they get into the meat grinder that is the SEC starting this week with Georgia's game against South Carolina. But for the second week in a row, Gabe Harris has shown me something and looks like a guy that could be a player for this Georgia defensive line this season. And so with that, that wraps up our winners and losers segment. Let's go ahead and pop over the questions you guys have. Anything you guys want to talk about, we can talk about the Georgia game. We can talk about the Alabama game. We can talk about anything in between, NFL. I will say, as a New England Patriots fan, watching my team have to play against Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Jordan Davis, it's very not fun. And you can very clearly understand why the Bulldogs have won 2 straight national championships playing the way that they have. And so, let's sort of take away today. Lorenzo Carter had an outstanding game for the Atlanta Falcons, sack of Bryce Young, I believe a fumble, either forced or recovered there for him as well. Darnell Washington had a nice block on Nick Bosa. Roquan Smith had a sack. So quick sort of run through there when it comes to your Bulldogs in the NFL. G Bama Boy, good to see you. Hope you're doing well, especially after last night. Crow King, yeah. Gabe Harris, look, they brought in 3 outside linebackers in this class, and you move Harris down there. Guys played really well, and that has been something that I've been encouraged by with what we have seen from him in the first couple of weeks. Barry Watkins, yeah, Auburn, that was a mess of a game last night. They tried very hard to give that game away. Hugh Nash, yeah, again, Kirby seems optimistic about where this team is at this point. Like they're always going to be, this is sports. Fans are always going to worry and maybe be more pessimistic than they should be, or in other cases more confident than they should be. But I think from 2 weeks, winning 48-7 and 45-3, I think you take that. And we're going to learn more about this Georgia team starting this week against South Carolina. I think that Kirby Smart, when he has had the chance to do so in the past, wants to make a statement against Shane Beamer in South Carolina. There might be some bad blood there. Kirby Smart out and out called it a rivalry in his post-game press conference yesterday. And I think, this is a chance to sort of go out there and show, yeah, it hasn't been a great couple of weeks for the SEC. There are people doubting us, wondering how good this Georgia team is. I think maybe this is the first time, pun intended here, that maybe you see Georgia let off the leash this Saturday against South Carolina. Dog85, yeah, wrote about this morning. He very well could have made winners and losers. Dylan Bell looked electric at that running back position. 3 carries, 28 yards. Now, he's going to continue to be a wide receiver for Georgia. I think you want to continue to see him as a wide receiver and develop him there. Deebo Samuel, I think, signed an $80 million deal with the San Francisco 49ers. Meanwhile, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley are getting $10, $11 million one-year deals. That's why you're going to continue to see him developed as a wide receiver. But if you can get him something like 6, 7, 8 carries a game, use him maybe away. Ty Montgomery comes to mind there. Dylan Bell has juice at that running back position where, you see it a little bit from Roderick Robinson. We'll see as he continues to develop over the course of his freshman season. We'll see if Kendall Milton's able to get that back as he continues to get healthier from his hamstring injury. I thought he looked a little bit better this week, but he's obviously still not 100%. I think Dylan Bell is absolutely a guy that has juice and is someone that you're going to continue to see at that running back position there. Let's see. Randy Hall. So I think this is going to be a big weekend in terms of finding out who Georgia's next commitment might possibly be, or we'll limit it there to Aiden Breland and LJ McCray on the defensive line there. If either or both of those guys come visit for Georgia this weekend against South Carolina, I think that's going to be telling. Obviously, Breland's high school teammate, Nate Frazier, is coming in on his official visit. It's a bye for Mater Dei High School this week. I think when it comes to, this South Carolina game, it's going to probably be Georgia's big recruiting weekend of the year, just because it's a chance, it's a semi-marquee game, 3:30 on CBS. It's not a very good slate. Game day is going to Colorado State this weekend, and part of that is because, the Deion effect, but there are not a whole lot of great games out there. And so, Georgia a chance to go out there and make a statement, make this their big game. Because you don't know what Ole Miss is going to look like later in the season. Tennessee game, obviously, on the road. Georgia, Florida is in Jacksonville. I think Georgia's going to use this as a chance to make this their marquee football game and really show what everything can do there. Brian Keppel, I'll be interested. It's not an area of concern for me. I'll just be interested in seeing, how this secondary holds up. They just haven't been tested through the first 2 weeks. And while, yes, they, forced 3 interceptions, 2 of those came off tips. One of those, the Chaz Chambliss one, was just a total, ball bouncing their way. I will say Kirby sort of downplayed the Tyke Smith interception. Dalen Everett got in there and tipped the ball up in the air. I think he deserves some credit for that. And Tyke made a good play on the ball to go pick it off. And then Malachi Stark's interception, as we touched on earlier in the show, is just an incredible display of athleticism there. Look, South Carolina's offensive line is not great. I think it's a chance for the Georgia defensive line to feast should they choose to do so. And I want to see against those South Carolina pass catchers who have gotten off to a good start this season. Spencer Rattler, who has, I think, improved with the new offensive coordinator for South Carolina. How does the secondary hold up? Again, not a true concern for me, just a position of curiosity. Let's see. Yeah, Crow King. Mekhi Muse is just good. There's no need to sugarcoat it. There's no need to issue qualifiers. He's probably going to continue to be Georgia's punt returner, even when Ladd McConkey gets healthy. And he's a guy who showed us some impressive burst when he had a nice break of a tackle against Ball State. Now we'll see how that translates to SEC play when the athletes do take a step up in terms of what he's going to see. But Muse just continues to make plays for this team, and he's gone, I think, in maybe a similar way to what we saw with Ladd McConkey, a guy from at first great story, walk on, under recruited from the state of Georgia, to go from that to a guy 2 long touchdowns back-to-back weeks for Georgia, and from the heart of Gwinnett, a Central Gwinnett High School alum there for Mekhi Muse. Certainly something there that you want to see as he continues to play and get better. Let's see. Thoughts, comments. Randy, so this is real easy. This is the last year, the Alabama-Texas home and home. They played the first one last year. They played the second leg this year. Georgia and Oklahoma, who were originally supposed to play yesterday, first game was in 2023. Next game wasn't until 2031. And while at the time the game was canceled, there were still some questions about when Oklahoma would join the league. We knew it was going to be long before 2031. And so they weren't going to bother to try to reschedule that game. And I don't think either side had a big appetite to cancel that first game of the season that they had. Try and find a neutral site venue week 2. It's a lot tougher to do that at this time of year just because NFL is starting this weekend, whereas those Labor Day games, those neutral site stadiums are more often than not empty. And so maybe Georgia could have gone and decided to play Oklahoma in a one-off. I don't know how much value there is there that. So Georgia instead elects to play Ball State, pay them $1.6 million to come to Athens. Not a whole lot that Georgia could do there. And it was just the timing of where things are going there. Let's see. Thoughts, comments, questions here. We'll do a few more. Wesley Spruce. Yeah, I expect Brock Bowers to have a better game this time around when they play South Carolina this week. 1 catch for 3 yards, had a drop, probably should have had a touchdown catch as well there. Look, you shouldn't need to throw the ball to Brock Bowers against Ball State to win. Now, maybe you want to do that against South Carolina. He had a big game last year against them. I think 5 catches, 142 yards, at least 2 touchdowns. I think he had a 3rd touchdown there as well. So I think with Brock, you'll see him involved a lot more. We'll see what his final yardage output ends up being. But this is a guy where, look, sometimes you want to use him and break him out in bigger games. You certainly saw that last year against TCU. Florida comes to mind, South Carolina there. I think this is a chance, as Georgia's schedule gets tougher, you get a chance to go out there and make a statement with what he can possibly do. I'm not too freaked out by the fact that he had 1 catch for 3 yards yesterday. Like, Georgia could have just not played him and it would have been fine. Xavier Kelly, we'll maybe do a few more questions before heading out. What do you think about the offensive line? Look, even under Todd Monken, this was not, I think, a dynamic rushing attack in terms of up the middle runs, the way maybe you saw from the Jim Chaney era at Georgia. It has always been an offensive line that as of late has been better in pass pro than run protection, in my opinion. You've continued to see that even with the offensive coordinator change. Look, you want to keep everything similar from what they were doing with Todd Monken to what they're doing with Mike Bobo. I think they've done that. I think the concepts that Mike Bobo ran, certainly when he was last year and then at South Carolina and Auburn as the offensive coordinator there, That's not what Georgia is running right now. And so, is it ever going to be a great running back situation for Georgia this year? No, I don't think so. I think you're going to have to find a way to make the most of it and get creative there. But I do think that with the skill set and talent around Carson Beck that they have, it is set up to be a very dynamic passing offense. We've seen that at times this year. I think that this is a big game for Carson to really go out there and show, okay, I don't have any of the jitters anymore. I know what I do well. I'm going to have probably my full complement of weapons. Certainly from a pass catching standpoint, we'll see ultimately what happens with Lab, but they've continued to say Daijun Edwards could play. I expect him to play this weekend against South Carolina. I think that's what makes this such a big game for Carson. Can he go out there and make a statement against an SEC foe? Because, and let's keep this in mind here, everyone was gassing up Jalen Milroe after that game against Middle Tennessee State, and then we see him in week 2 come back down to earth against a better Texas team. Carson made improvements this week, as I touched on earlier, and I'll be interested in seeing how he improves in week 3 now that he's got that full complement of weapons, now that I figure Brock Bowers is going to be involved, and Georgia goes into a marquee matchup against South Carolina. It's one of the bigger games of the week. It's a game Georgia should win easily, quite frankly, and I expect them to do that, but I'll be interested in seeing how they go out there and go about doing that. And so with that, we'll probably call it there. For today's episode of Connor in Coverage. We touched on the top of the show about Chris Cole, 4-star linebacker, adds to Georgia's number 1 overall ranked recruiting class, as Jeff sort of came on and said. Big win for Glenn Schumann, for the Georgia football program, as they continue to recruit and do well on the recruiting trail, specifically at that inside linebacker position. We go through winners and losers. We do that every Sunday night here on Connor in Coverage. We'll be back here next Sunday doing it once again, recapping what I expect to be a Georgia win over South Carolina. You've got Brandon Adams Monday through Friday, DawgNation Daily. You've got Mike Griffith Monday night on the beat. He was at Texas, Alabama last night. I'm sure he'll have some great stories from there. Jeff Sintel before the hedges on Wednesday, not just recapping what Georgia got in Chris Cole, but also talking about what should be a pretty big recruiting weekend in Athens this weekend. And on Thursday, happy hour with Kaylee Manziel. A lot to look forward to this week around DawgNation. SEC play starts, as Carson Beck said. It's just different when you're playing an SEC team. I think you're going to see that with Georgia this weekend. There should be a great bit more buzz inside Sanford Stadium leading up to the game. So with that, my name is Connor Riley. Chris Cole commits to Georgia. We'd run through winners and losers. This has been a DawgNation production. This has been Connor in Coverage.